All right, I will call this meeting of the West Milwaukee School Board to order, and I will lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, and before we get started this evening, in light of the events that happened in Waukesha during the parade yesterday, I just wanted to take a moment to have a moment of silence for the victims and those injured and their families. So if we could just all do that right now for 1 minute. All right, thank you everyone for that. Fortunately, there was none of our students that were injured during that time, but there were some of our students present, as well as families and lots of people who knew people who were affected by this event. So it's a terrible tragedy, and it was obviously not something that anyone wanted to see happen. So thank you. All right, Suzette, can you please do the roll?
Yes. Mr. Sikich?
Present.
Ms. Deal?
Here.
Mr. Burns?
Here.
Mr. Eustruck?
Here.
Mrs. Justum's excused. Mrs. Carr?
Here.
Mrs. Kaiser?
Here.
Mr. Keller is excused. President Lee?
Here. Proper notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with the open meeting laws of the state of Wisconsin. Do we have any modifications of the agenda? Seeing Dr. Lexman.
Can't hear.
Oh, 1 second. Brandon, can you? Oh. Dr. Lexman, 1 second. We have to switch the audio over.
All right, go ahead. Sorry about that.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and my apologies that I'm not in the room. I'm waiting for a results of a COVID test to come back. Everybody feels fine. But the one thing I was going to check on, Noah, is do we have the right committee reports listed, the board committee reports?
So I know everyone gave their reports last time, but there were, I believe, meetings since then for Rec and Finance. Is Life and Career Readiness have anything? Okay, so we will Life Readiness, so 8.3.2 we would remove from the agenda. And Brandon, if you can switch back audio. Do you have anything to say, Dr. Lexman? Otherwise, we'll move.
Was that it? Do you have anything else to say?
We'll move right into the superintendent's report, so we can just leave him on. So we'll move into item 6, the superintendent's report.
I can go right into the superintendent's report then. Yes, okay. I'm going to share screen to see if I remember how to do all of this. So 6.1 is our return to school, return to in-person learning update. And this one is relatively short because not much has changed since we last met on November 5th, but we'll go through it again, a little bit on our guiding principles, health metrics, a little bit of contact tracing changes, and kind of next steps kind of leading into maybe where we go in second semester. Again, focused on safety and well-being, learning that works for all, responsiveness and flexibility, and then practicality of implementation. Our external metrics, so that again, Milwaukee County and West Allis, West Milwaukee Health Department metrics, 3 of the 4 numbers that we received from our local health department have gone in the wrong direction since the last time we had a report. And this is a little bit delayed, but the last data we received from the local health department was November 9th. We're still kind of within the ranges where we've been for quite a while, but a little concerning that they're going in the wrong direction. Our internal metrics, however, are holding steady. This is essentially what I've been reporting on from week to week. We actually ticked down a little bit from November 5th to November 19th. So that's encouraging in terms of how things are going in our schools. This is the same data presented in a different way. And so this really tells the story of the percent positive, which is blue, has stayed pretty constant for us. And again, we've set numbers of if we get to 5% in both blue and red, that's when we start closing classrooms or even whole schools. And the highest we've gotten is percent students and staff in quarantine at 3%. But the overall red, that if we turn this into a line, that's trending down over time. So that's encouraging for us as we start to think about, where we go next as more and more young students are vaccinated. The little contact tracing update, we're moving contact tracing to Maxim Healthcare. It's something that many school districts in our area are doing, whether it's Maxim or another provider. And it really is so that we get people that's what they do. It provides consistency. They know the conversations with the health departments, and it really will allow our nurses to focus on student health needs because they had full plates before COVID with students that have health needs in school. And so turning this over to Maxim Healthcare, we think is going to be helpful for us as we get through the winter. And then finally, next steps, we're monitoring vaccination status of students. And so we'll be pulling from the registry over into Skyward or into a database so that we'll soon be able to report on percent of students at different grade levels that are vaccinated. And I think that might be helpful for the board as we start to think about ramping down mitigation practices. And I'm using the ramp down mitigation practices language that came actually from Children's Wisconsin. So once a month, we get a meeting and an update from Children's Wisconsin and what their conversations, they're just starting to talk about, are they going to make any recommendations about ramping down mitigation practices? But the one doctor, when she was speaking, she said the general consensus in their world is to wait until after the holidays before any conversation. So to see the impact of vaccinations on younger students, see the impact of holiday travel on any kind of spread. And so we're going to be looking for if there are any other recommendations. And until then, we're going to keep reminding principals, keep reminding people as they come into our buildings that masks are required. And even though it's hard to continue to do it consistently, we think is a really important step. Okay, so stop sharing. Then I'll go to 6.2, legislative update. There's a lot here. I'm not going to read all of this. The school report cards were released for the 2021 school year. And it's been released with a cautionary statement. I think it's important because it's pretty difficult given that, these tests were taken last year after we had students out of school for a long time. I right away want to jump in and compare how did we do compared to other districts, but it's very difficult to compare it all now because attendance matters in this. The percent of students that participated in the test matters. So really difficult to compare, but what it is good for is it gives us a new baseline. We know we have work to do, but we've done it before. So this is kind of the new kind of baseline to build from. Then Governor Evers took action on several K-12 bills that were passed by the legislature and signed into law, a number of them. So Wisconsin Act 89, this is the one that requires DPI to create an online portal to do a better job explaining school finances. So it's not more work for us, it's something DPI has to create, but we think that'll be very helpful for communities to see the dollars and how they get used in school districts. Wisconsin Act 90, this requires new content in the human growth and development curriculum regarding the safe haven law. And that's a law that allows somebody to bring a newborn to a hospital if they want to relinquish the newborn. So that we're going to figure out how to include that. And again, we think that's important. Assembly Bill now Wisconsin 220, now Act 83, requires schools to annually provide information to parents on youth apprenticeship. We've talked about this one before. We do quite a bit of this already, but more information about youth apprenticeship and getting kids into careers is helpful. Then the governor vetoed Senate Bill 454. This was the overhaul of the reading readiness program. So we've talked about that at a number of board meetings in the last months. Then there was a legislative task force that was formed back in August of 2020. And they've come out with some recommendations, which we think are also very interesting. And we hope there's support and dollars to go with these. So increasing the number of teachers of color and providing loans and incentives for people of color to go into teaching. improving early literacy for children of color. So we're very supportive of that. And then also provide funding for full day 4-year-old kindergarten. Right now, 4-year-olds that are in a full day only count as 0.6 of a student for membership purposes. So this would change that, and it would increase our membership and therefore funding. So we support the things that have come out of this, these recommendations. And then at the federal level, right, there's the $1.2 trillion bipartisan infrastructure bill, and we'll see if that has any influence on education. The larger bill that is still moving at the federal level certainly will have some impact on education if it gets passed and signed into law. And then 6.3 are Board of Education recognitions. So Shared Journeys would like to recognize Jenny Salazinski, Danny Haben, and Lisa Kola. They each received a child care certification in advocacy for children. At Pershing, it's a thank you to Don Trowell Underwood for filling in for Jeff Smith this month. So we appreciate your positive energy and all of your help to make our school days run smoothly. And those are custodians that are really integral to the work at Pershing. And then the Central Athletic Director, Justin Marion, wants to highlight a number of student athletes who were recognized on the Woodland All-Conference teams for the fall. And I'm not going to read all their names because I'll get them almost all wrong, but I do want to congratulate the student athletes at Central. And then also at Nathan Hale, the Athletic Director, Greg Lucas, is also recognizing students, fall athletes for the Greater Metro Conference. And so those are listed and will be in the record as well. And then 6.4, just some updates and information items. So just a few responses to public comments from November 5th. Mr. Mulling made comments regarding the purpose of public school board meetings and objected to how Board President Noah Lee described the purpose of school board meetings. And so I just want to try to clarify. So the board, the administration, we're committed to providing the opportunity for the public to make comments, but it is not required in state statute. State statute requires that school boards meet in public, which is not the same as a public meeting, right? So that's the distinction. The school boards are required to meet in public. There's not a requirement to include public comments, although like I said, we're committed to that opportunity. We think it's important feedback. Then there were questions about the cost of the community survey related to our facility master plan, and that was less than $10,000 for a survey that went to 60,000 addresses. The results of the survey were reported to the board at the workshop meeting on November 15th, and as expected, we kind of anticipated that there would be support to right size and modernize schools. This is work that we're going to have to figure out how to get some energy into it. But the price, even just for the high school project alone at $180 million was too high. And so part of what happened at the workshop is with Bray Architects and C.G. Schmidt, the construction company, started to talk about a referendum potentially of around $149 million with some additional dollars from district funds going into the project overall to see if that starts to make sense. Again, no decisions have been made. The board has not voted on a referendum question at this point. Then there was also questions about our ongoing use of We Have Trust for our health insurance provider. And repeat myself here, but that question's been responded to on multiple occasions. So it's just a matter of going back into the board meetings and the board record. Mr. Broadwell commented on course content and critical race theory. So we affirm again that we're not teaching critical race theory, but we are committed to our equity work. And again, that's organized using our equity beliefs and the social justice standards. Then Natalie Wolf and Chuck Kronowski commented on our mitigation practices related to COVID-19. Like I said in the first part of my report, we're going to probably review these again in January to see where we are. Dorian Templin commented on the change of healthcare providers for retirees and wasn't happy about that. She attended the first meeting with retirees, which did not go as well. I think our team did a much better job at the second meeting, but these kind of changes are always hard. When anybody's asked to change their healthcare provider, it's a lot of paperwork, it's all the new cards. So the change is difficult, but I think it's important for everybody to remember and for the public that's listening tonight, overall retirees are being provided with better coverage at a lower cost, right? So that's really why we pursued it and the board supported it. Then Jim Nickel commented about the new coordinator of culturally relevant practices position, and he's correct that it is a diversity, equity, and inclusion position. What's interesting is he asked how much of the budget is dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion versus academics. And what's interesting to me is the equity work is about academics and working to ensure all students are successful, right? These aren't mutually exclusive efforts. It's really all the same work to prepare kids to be successful when they leave us. And then last couple things, just quick updates. So again, we continue to work on student behavior in all of our schools. Last week was really challenging at Nathan Hale, but I spent a good part of last week in the building, and students really were engaging. They were kind. They were following the expectations. And so hopefully we're getting there, but also on the employment summary for this evening are the youth advisors for Nathan Hale and some of our other schools as we continue to work to return to normal. It's just getting different supports in. Youth advisors are actually, we call them youth advisors, they're actually educational assistants in terms of kind of how we classify them as employees, but they come with a different skill set and we train them a little bit differently. And then last, as I wrap up the superintendent's report, I just want to take the opportunity to wish everyone a safe and fun Thanksgiving. As difficult as these months have been and as challenging as events in the world can be, and they are right now, I think there's still a lot for us to be thankful for. We're here. So we encourage everyone to take the coming days to rest, relax, reconnect with friends and family so we come back after the break refreshed. And that concludes the superintendent's report.
All right. Brandon, if you could move the audio back over to me, or us. Thank you very much, Dr. Lexman. We will move on now to item number 7, which are public comments. As a reminder, each person will have 3 minutes to address the board. You please state your name and your address before beginning. And as a reminder, the board cannot respond or discuss any of the comments that you give. And if there is any needed response, it will be provided by the next regular board meeting if necessary. If you are watching or participating in the meeting via Zoom and you would like to participate in public comments, there is a link in the chat that I provided. Please click on that link and fill out that form. That is the form that we're using for our public comments sign-ups at this point. So please utilize that if you are looking to make a public comment. So, with that being said, we'll start with the first person on the list, which is Mr. John Mulling. And unfortunately, we don't have the timer on the thing. We're working on that, so I'll be using my phone again.
I was hoping that would be there because it gives you a little better idea where you're at.
I can hold my phone like this if it helps.
Yeah.
Whenever you're ready.
John Mulling, 3850 South Pole Drive, New Berlin. I have a couple things about COVID I want to talk about. From a Wall Street Journal item about 2 weeks ago, an article was written by 2 MDs from Sloan Kettering Cancer Center and Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, which are 2 very extremely prestigious people or places. The most salient point of the whole thing was they said there are 28 million children 5 to 11 in the United States of America. And you don't have to write things down because you're all going to get a copy of it. Of those, the 28 million children from 5 to 11 in the United States as of November 9th, 94 children have died of COVID, with no outstanding other medical conditions. Taking that to percentages, dividing 94 children by 28 million, you come up with a statistic of dying of that. 0.000033, which is pretty close to 1 in a million chance if you don't have any underlying conditions. That's for 5 to 11-year-old children. There was a Pfizer study of 2,886 kids. There were unvaccinated 663 children. Of those 663 children, unvaccinated 16 developed COVID, or 2%. Vaccinated children were 1,305 children. 3 developed COVID, or 0.02%. So they were better off. But only 16 children developed COVID in that group. Everybody says follow the science. I really wish you'd follow the science. In the article, it says the CDC estimates that as of June 2021, 42% of all children had COVID. And by now, they estimate 50% had COVID. The CDC said that. Why doesn't Dr. Fauci tell you that? I think that's a really good question. Even the CDC says that, but they won't tell you that. Finally, about 2 weeks ago, the Fifth Circuit Court of Louisiana ruled that a vaccine mandate issued by OSHA was unconstitutional. OSHA has since retracted their January 4th mandate. I think that's extremely important because if you have in the back of your mind, or if you even have the authority to mandate a COVID vaccine for these children, authority or not, you will not be backed up by the federal government. You will be responsible for the decision you make, unless the courts overturn it. Nothing has happened since the 5th District of Louisiana Circuit Court. That's a pretty big decision you're going to have to make. And I know a lot of people that do not want to have their children vaccinated. And when you see a number like I just showed you, 0.000033% of dying if you don't have an underlying health condition, you might be considering alternatives. And with that, I'll stop. I have a copy of the article for all of you. And I have these for the notes for the minute. This is the article from the Wall Street Journal. And this is for the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malling. Mr. Steve Broadwell?
Steve Broadwell, 12965 West Ohio Court in Berlin. A couple items. You have our kids complete a YRBS survey, just like Hale did last week. Questions in it are quite disturbing. You said it's anonymous and voluntary, which makes me wonder even more, why do it, if not simply to comply with DPI requirements, so you get more grant money. Some questions on it. How many times did someone you were dating force you to do sexual things you didn't want? Same question, but did anyone force you to do it?
Oops.
If you have contemplated suicide, how would you do it? How many times have you tried to hurt yourself? It asks about vape products, alcohol use, abuse, prescription pain medication by name, first time for sexual intercourse, what sort of protection used, intercourse with how many people, sex with female and male. It asks what student's sexual identity is and gives them 7 choices. It asks if a student is transgender. What's this for? Many of these questions will plant ideas in kids' heads or make them think they're missing out on something. A student that has not had sex, has not tried painkillers, has not thought about being transgender, has not thought about hurting oneself, may now start thinking of those things. If teachers are involved with their students, it seems they can identify problems and deal with them on an individual basis, rather than plant all these thoughts in vulnerable kids' heads with a broad brush survey that does nothing to help a hurting individual and may make it worse. Regarding the BLM poster displayed in the first grade class window at Irving, Marty, your response was dismissive of our concern over this very political, Marxist, America-hating movement like BLM being pushed onto our impressionable young. You evidently were in full support when you said BLM is not political in nature, which I hope you meant as a joke, and went on to update us that the posting of this Black Lives Matter poster was part of a broad and thoughtful school project incorporating student ideas on diversity of which parents were informed. The project is aligned with our commitment to equity and more specifically aligned with the social justice standards which guide these efforts. Do you honestly expect us to believe that a thoughtful first grader, this was a first grade class, is going to focus on BLM? I would instead suggest that this was a teacher's virtue signal to your hyper-focus on race, diversity, equity, and social justice, and her willingness to please you and the principal by proving her woke compliance with, yes, your CRT agenda. Can't start that indoctrination too early, can you? Why force feed our kids with this emotional manipulation for social control in what amounts to reteaching of racism that was on a mend in this country, on the mend? We did notice the sign's now gone, so you seem at odds with the school that apparently now realizes it is inappropriate for first grader. Now a sign that reads, in our community, our strength is our diversity. Unfortunately, just more of the same.
Thank you, Mr. Broadwell. Let's see here. that's the last person that I have signed up for public comments this evening. If there is anyone else who maybe joined Zoom late that would like to sign up, I'll wait a minute. There's a link in the chat for signing up for public comments. I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity. All right, I'm not seeing any other people signed up, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comments, and we'll move on to item 8, which is starting with 8.1, the review of the board calendar. So today is Monday, November 22nd. We have a regular Board of Education meeting this evening, followed immediately by a committee workshop on financial stability and efficiency for our facilities update. And then we want to wish everyone a wonderful Thanksgiving break. So there'll be no school November 24th, 25th, and 23rd, 24th, and 25th. So I hope everyone has a wonderful break and time away. And then on Monday, December 13th at 6 p.m. we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Then on Monday, November 20th at 6 p.m. we have a regular Board of Education meeting. Then we have our school winter break starting from December 22nd and going through January 2nd. And then we have our first meeting of the new year on Monday, January 10th with a regular Board of Education meeting. So I will move on to item 8.2. So what we want to do here is I'm looking for if there's any volunteers to serve on the West Dallas Youth Commission through the city of West Dallas. And so historically, there's been a position on the committee from the board to be able to basically sit in on the meetings that the Youth Commission has. It's made up of high school students from all of our high schools, and including Dotke. I mean, it's open to all three of the high schools. And essentially, they will do various things. Sometimes they're city-related things, so beautification, learning about the city, how government works. Mayor Devine is kind of the head of the Youth Commission and kind of directs it. And then they oftentimes also have, and many of us have been a part of their candidate forums for school board, as well as they have also looked into doing other candidate forums for Supreme Court candidates as well in the state. So the one caveat to this is that unfortunately they meet at the exact same time as we do. And so they always meet on Mondays. I've been trying for several years now to try to get them to move it to any other day of the week. But unfortunately for the majority of the people, the students obviously, most importantly, but then other committee members as well, Monday seems to work the best, and by one vote when they voted just this last year to try to figure out what would be. So I want to still open up an opportunity for someone who might be interested in it, but it would be with the caveat we'd want to make sure that it doesn't interfere with, the board duties that you might have to do. So you might not be able to participate as much as, you wouldn't want to go to every single meeting, so you're missing your board duties and to go serve on that committee. But is there someone to be interested in participating when they were able to provide the feedback on that? So we can provide that name to the city.
I think I would.
Jane?
I would be interested in that.
Okay. All right, so what I will do, Jane, is I will provide the information to probably Rebecca Grill from the city, and then she will include you on the Youth Commission invites and things like that moving forward. And that's the only thing that I would ask is we try to avoid as much interference as possible. I think they start at 7 p.m. for this-
6:30.
Oh, 6:30? Oh, it used to be 7.
Because there's one
Okay,
tonight.
6:30.
My
So unless
son's
we have a very short meeting, or if it's on and off, it might be on and off week, when we don't have a workshop or something like that. Obviously, feel free to participate as much as you can. All right, well,
And
thank you
then,
for.
do you want me to report back to the board? Is it something, or do we just represent?
You just represent, yeah,
Okay,
there's, I mean,
sure.
certainly if there's something that you feel is worthy for bringing back to the board, certainly we can definitely carve out some time in the agenda for that, if there's something you would like to report back on it. But yeah, generally it's being representative, be able to kind of provide perspective as a school board member. And sometimes there's things that are related, there's things that are happening within the district, so that's kind of the helpful part of it.
Sure, I would enjoy that.
Awesome, thank you, Jane. All right, so then we'll move on to item 8.3, our board committee reports. So we'll start with 8.3.1, Recreation and Community Services. Mr. Sikich.
Well, This is gonna be an extremely long report. It's 2 sentences.
Everyone settle in.
Our committee met on Monday, November 15th. At the meeting, we reviewed and finalized the items that we are bringing to the board tonight for action. That concludes my report.
Excellent. I love when Jeff gives reports. That's great. And I'm sure if we have other questions about all the things that we have talked about later in our actions item section, we will ask them at that time. So thank you very much, Jeff. Is there anything else that someone had to bring to Jeff's committee for consideration in the future? I was going to give that opportunity. No? All right. Well, then we'll move on. Again, we removed the Life Readiness Through College and Career Preparation Committee report this time. So we're going to move basically to 8.3.3, which is our financial stability and efficiency, which would be Jane again, I believe? Yes. Okay.
Our first agenda item was the unaudited 2021 budget status. The 2021 audit is still wrapping up. So at this time, we would like to give an update on unaudited financials, meaning these are still subject to change until our audit is officially complete. Our strategic plan has had a goal: budget accurately to ensure that no more than 2% of the general fund, Fund 10 budget, is added to fund balance annually. Our 2021 Fund 10 balance is increasing by approximately $600,000, which is 0.5 of our Fund 10 budget. So summarizing, it means that we met the goal towards our strategic plan. So that was wonderful. And then Caitlin also reported that we had another goal that to increase fund balance to 20% of the general fund, Fund 10 budget. We met this goal for the first time at the end of the 1920 school year and maintained it this year. Our unassigned fund balance is approximately 21.4 of our general fund. So again, we met 2 of our strategic plan goals. Again, these are unaudited results and are still subject to change until our 2021 audit is wrapped up in the next month or 2. Once it's complete, our auditors at Baker Tilly will present a workshop in January or February on our completed audited finances. The next agenda item was to remove a workshop on the budget calendar. And again, because I'm a freshman on the board, what it basically was this item. We've had a budget calendar for the last few years. The budget calendar does not change from year to year, except making the dates reflect the new year. Last year, the board requested we bring this to the FFE committee meeting and then notify the board we're removing that workshop going forward. So that's exactly what we did. We okayed it at that point. Our Financial Stability and Efficiency Committee discussed this, and we agreed it made sense that we proceed with the reviewing and approving or adopting the budget calendar on the same night. So this will take place on December 13th. And then we had a wonderful presentation from Steve that he will be sharing with us during the workshop tonight. So stay tuned for that.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for Jane regarding her? Kristen?
I have 2 requests, actually, if it
Sure.
could be reviewed.
Sure.
One request is to review $15 minimum starting for our district for all employees. So $15 an hour for all West Allis, West Milwaukee School District staff.
Okay.
And I also would like to, I'm hearing a lot of concern about, right now, we need to bridge these educational gaps that we're seeing nationwide, plus our behavior situations. And I would like for us to look into in-class educational assistant needs across the district, including part-time educational assistants who are interested in going full-time, and get them in the classrooms, especially for our younger ones who need that learning support.
Okay.
So I would like, I know it's a lot, but I would like for us to look into
And I'll
it.
go back and I will make sure that I add those to our agenda for next time. Yep.
I got you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just one clarifying question, Kristen. So for not all of our employees are hourly employees. So are you asking for $15 per hour for only the hourly
For
employees?
hourly as a base,
Okay,
yes.
got it. Okay, just want to make sure that's clear.
Oh, thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Any other questions for Jane? All right, if not, we'll move on to item 8.4, board reports, member reports of community events. Does anyone have any community events they'd like to report on? Kristen?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, I virtually attended the Irving Elementary Veterans Day ceremony, which was absolutely wonderful. As the spouse of a Navy veteran, I always get choked up at those events, and it was nice to see the kids singing and their music director write a book, and I just loved how it all interacted together. And then last week, I attended the Frank Lloyd Wright winter concert. It was my first time attending a middle school concert, and man, is it different than an elementary school winter concert. But it was wonderful. The kids were phenomenally prepared, and I'm just thrilled for Miss Newberger, what a wonderful performance the kids put on.
Excellent, great. Amy?
Jane and I actually had the opportunity to attend the Community Transition Services Program, their Thanksgiving luncheon
yeah.
last week. It was a wonderful experience. We had an opportunity to see a lot of the students. They served us. They made all of the food, so some of it was actually family recipes. It was delicious. So it was just a wonderful opportunity for staff and students and their families and Jane and I to just kind of sit down and be thankful for all that we have. So I want to say thank you to all those students and staff over there. It was and the volunteers and the families. It was an awesome experience. So
Great, thank you for sharing. Anyone else have any events they want to share? I will note that I was able to attend the Lane Orchestra concert that was held last week Wednesday. My son was in it, so I had invested interest in going, but I want to say that all the students did a fantastic job. Mary Pat, who is the director over there, as well as the entire district's music director, did a phenomenal job with all the different groups, and the songs were just amazing. They're very, very well, and I know they were very excited to get back to in-person live concerts, giving live concerts. So I think they did a very good job, and I was very happy that I was able to attend. All right, let's move on to item 9, our consent agenda. We have item 9.1, approval of minutes from our regular board meeting on November 8th and our board workshop on November 15th. We have the employment, item 9.2, the employment summary, item 9.3, the supplementary contracts, and item 9.4, the financial summary. Is anything separated? Jeff?
9-3.
9.3, all right. So then I would look for a motion on items 9.1, 9.2, and 9.4.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. And then I would look for a motion on item 9.3, Jeff.
I need to recuse myself.
Okay, thank you.
motion to approve?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, and one recusal. All right, thank you very much for that. Let's move on to item 10, our action items. Starting with item 10.1, extended travel for high school students to France, summer of 2023. And I believe we have Ms. Engel, I'm not going to be able to pronounce the name correctly, Engelkemeyer on. Oh, Brandon, can we switch audio over, please? 1 second.
Engelkemeyer is correct.
Oh, right. Go ahead, you're good.
Do you want me to start?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I just want to thank the board for your time and attention in advance, and thank you again for the previous approvals for the trip that we have planned this summer of 2022 for France, and the trip that we have for the spring break to Senegal, to West Africa. And a lot of feedback that I got from the France trip were some of the kids talking about, how much was it? And, oh, would we go again? Would we go again? Would there be another one? So my rep from ER Tour said that we could start fundraising, start advertising for 2023 now, so that there's more time for the kids to work on financing, and we could do more fundraising for those who would be interested in going in 2023. So that's what this would be for June 20th, 2023 to July 1st, 2023. And it would be going to Paris, to a different location. It'd be Paris still, arriving in Paris, but Strasbourg and Lyon. And Strasbourg is on the east side near the German border. It's in the Alsace region. Lyon is in the middle of the country, and there'd be like a cooking class. Lyon is the second largest city. It's known for its gastronomy, with a trip to Dijon down to Avignon, which is where a lot of like Henri Toulouse-Lautrec, other artists, or were inspired by Avignon, and then down to Nice as well, and then coming back. So it would be the same setup as our trip for 2022 with the 12-day trip, and it would come out to $4,720, but for 18 months, it would be like $257 a month. And EF Tourist has a very good, very generous COVID emergency allowance where they would have, it would, at no extra cost to our travelers, they would have EF rep coming in and staying with the student and flying a parent or a guardian out if something like that were to happen, just as a backup for any concern for any of the trip. So I guess that's what we're requesting. And I don't know if I can share my screen, but I have a really good video about group leaders and parents reflecting on their children and the experience that they had with the EF tours and why it is such a eye-opening, mind-expanding experience to go as a global citizen. But that's the gist of what the trip, it would be for Hale, Central, and Dot Key. They don't have to take French. Ideally, it would be for French students, but we've had kids, like we've got a group of 15 going this summer, and they're not all French students. And we have a group of 6, 7, 8 going to Senegal, who are not all French speakers. So it seems to be an interest, and that's what a lot of schools will establish, the regularity of the trip so that it becomes a tradition. It becomes a regular opportunity, a regular habit for the kids. So that's what I'm very gratefully requesting, if it would be possible to have a trip approval for 2023 for our kids to have the experience again, for those who are not able to go, for those new incoming students who might be interested in going. Thank you so much.
Questions?
So,
Jane, 1 second. I gotta make sure the audio gets switched back over. Brandon, can you make sure switch the audio back over? Good? Okay, go ahead, Jane.
so are you saying that some students might participate twice, go a second time?
There certainly would not be a limit. There certainly could, because it's going to different places. I know one student had wanted to go to Senegal and France, and her parents had been considering, and then they decided that they would just go one step at a time. So that certainly is an option, but generally it's a chance that when the student knows it's coming, if they can't go one particular time, they can start saving up and they can go the next time. But it certainly would be an option because, as I said, they're to different parts of the country and very different parts, and both extremely rich environments.
Thank you.
I had one question. Is there a limit of how many students would be able to go?
It's like 6 students for every chaperone, so we would just add more chaperones. Like with this trip, we have 2 chaperones, Nancy Acevedo, who is the Spanish teacher at Central, and myself are going, because there's also a French teacher at Hale, but she's got a little baby at home, a little boy, and she wasn't ready to travel yet. So Nancy is coming with me with this trip.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Thank you very
You
much.
guys are so awesome. Thank you so, so much. On behalf of all the kids whose lives will be changed with this experience, thank you so much to this amazing school district. Thank you.
Have fun.
Yeah, enjoy. All right, thank you very much for that. We will move on to item 10.2, our Woodland Conference Shared Services Agreement. Ms. Strasser.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight to ask the board to approve our board president and clerk to sign off on the shared service agreement with Greendale School District for fiscal management and oversight of the Woodland Conference. Previously, and I know that's the same in the Greater Metro Conference. I'm not sure about other conferences, but the conference commissioner is the person that would handle the finances for the overall conference. And the Woodland Conference athletic directors, when they just recently hired a new commissioner, decided it would be better fiscal practice for them to have someone else handling all the financial matters. And in this case, it's going to be the Greendale School District. The question came up in our committee, kind of why Greendale? Couple of the reasons that they selected Greendale, one is they're centrally located. Two, they probably were lowest at risk for moving out of that conference. Their principal is currently, plays a leadership role in the conference. And so that's kind of the reason why they selected Greendale. But in your packet, you have a copy of that. And then basically just Greendale would handle all financial matters for the Woodland Conference then.
Questions, comments, concerns? Well then, I'd look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That passes. Thank you very much. All right, then we'll then move on to item 10.3, the fee schedule for district facility usage. Ms. Strasser.
All right, thank you. So school board policy 7510 dictates that the superintendent shall develop policies for the granting of permission and then also a fee schedule. As you can see, the last time our fee schedule was updated was in 2008. And this had been something that we were working on as our district with the development of the turf fields and just some facility changes. And then COVID came and sort of went on the back burner. So, and with the hiring of Ben Versnick, he's done a lot of work on researching. And I just have to share, we can research district after district. There's really no apples to apples comparison because every district's facilities are so different. So we really kind of tried to look at who would have a similar facility and kind of who is in our immediate area in terms of kind of, if you want to call it competition and keeping competitive. And just every district handles their facility scheduling levels, priorities, fees differently. So we try to develop a model that just best fit our district. So that's what we have in front of you this evening for approval.
Questions? Oh, look it up. Kristen.
Have you looked at, the pool price is pretty pricey for the area. I know for a fact New Berlin charges far less per hour, and so a local swim team has had to move from using our facilities, which now limits West Allis students, kids from utilizing a swim team. And I just know this from personal experience, but I'm just wondering if, these are obviously hourly rates. Have we looked at, and have we generated any loss from those pool usage?
We actually haven't. The two previous swim teams, swim clubs that have worked with us continue to work with us. And so we haven't seen a loss. If anything, we've seen increased usage because a number of, I know other schools' pools are either down. I mean, that's something that I know districts are looking at across the board is pools, especially when they're co-opted and combined and may not offer it as, you know, part of swim and things like that. So we really haven't. The other thing we have looked at, because the two clubs we've worked with, we've been working with them for years, is some partnerships. So maybe not necessarily will they, would we charge them full price for use of the pools, but they'll help contribute to upgrading different things, whether it's lane markers, just different steps within the pools, different things like that. So developing more of a partnership than, you know, fee charges.
Okay. We'll talk. Thank you.
Amy.
The only question I had was just, how did you determine, I'm just looking at some of the rates, like the auditoriums, like the ones that you lowered the cost on, is there any particular reason, I mean, it's just because were we over, like for instance, the gymnasiums, like for elementary level 2, we want to go from $25 to $15. Is it just that we realize that it's doesn't meet the capacity for like 25? I'm just curious as to why we would lower the price.
Yeah, so I mean, part of it is, you know, one thing I want to share is our department manages all the facility rentals, but all the funds go to our general fund 10. So we wanted to try and encourage, and I mean, some of our rates were a little high for what we could offer, and that's the other thing. Like a Hoover gym does not compare to a Jefferson gym, two different facilities. So some we lowered a little bit, some we raised a little bit. We want to try to encourage usage of the facilities. You know, some of the things that we hear, obviously our district is very centrally located. And then B, I have to give a shout out to Steve and his facility and operations staff. They do a great job, and they're really the hosts when we have facility rentals and things like that. And so we want to really encourage people to make use of the facilities to generate some revenue. And so in terms of like auditoriums, I mean, nothing compares to Central and Hale. West Milwaukee's auditorium is probably the next nicest, but doesn't have some of the same amenities that is Hale and Central. And then obviously Horseman and Docky's auditoriums are different as well.
Any other questions? I had one thing that's kind of, it's related to this, and it's the contracts related to these rentals. I heard a weird story when we were renting out the Hale parking lot for State Fair. They wouldn't allow parents in to pick up their kids, and they had to run across the parking lot to get to the street to get picked up. Is it possible that in the future, when we're doing these contracts, that do we allow that people can come in and pick up their children from the school, even if they've rented the parking lot out? Like, they're not gonna park there, but they're gonna drive through, pick up children and leave? Is that something we can work into that contract?
Yeah, absolutely. And that contract, because of the nature of it, that one goes directly through the finance office. So I think some of that was language that may have been put in, but I know.
You have something to say? Why don't you come over here, Steve?
Thank you. Yes, they weren't supposed to do that, and I did talk to the gentleman from DOA that I did the contract with.
Okay.
And then we went and met with the individuals that were at there.
Okay.
At Hale, and said that this has to stop.
Okay.
Because it all came about because there was inclement weather
Yes.
1 or 2 days. And so, but next year, if they come back again and ask, I'll make sure that that's stipulated in writing in there.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that parents can pick up their kids without having to run across the parking lot in a thunderstorm. So thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. All right, that's all the questions I have. Any other questions that my questions may have spurned? No? All right, I would look for a motion then.
Motion to approve?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. All right, and let's see, item 10.4, who's going to do that one? It's a new playground at the Recreation Center, Ms. Strasser.
All right, thank you. So I know we brought this just in general conversation up before as part of our renovations and upgrades at the rec center. Our current playground is really there to service ages 2 to 5, and there's zero accessibility. So we are looking to upgrade, and we're looking for board approval to allow us to grant the award to Lee Recreation in the amount not to exceed $375,000. That is a slight increase than what we planned, but through the planning process, and some listening sessions that we've done with people in the community and feedback, we've found some additional pieces that we would like to add. Part of what we found in this process, though, there's no one size fits all, so it will be some piecing of things together. And the second thing is we will be able, if approved, to lock in the equipment pieces tonight, so those prices will not fluctuate after the new year. The thing that could potentially change is labor costs, and that's where I know it looks, and it is a significant amount of money, but majority is not in the playground equipment itself. It's in the removal and the labor to install, and then in the additional walkways to get that accessibility, along with the poured-in-play surface. So some of those costs may fluctuate just a little bit after the new year, so that's why we built in that cushion. Another reason we chose Lee, so we did do a community listening session with our immediate neighborhood. We put out flyers and invited them to come. And then in addition to that, we had large posters. If you've been to the rec center and have seen, so people could see the 2 bids that came in and could vote on them. And what was really cool is a number of our preschool kids, and a lot of kids voted, which I think is awesome because they're the primary users of the equipment. And just some of their feedback, you could tell the parents wrote like word for word what they said. But that overwhelmingly, the kids picked the equipment from Lee. We also did a Facebook post, and we were really surprised, but people are really passionate about playground equipment. That Facebook post just got a ton of engagement. So when people really were drawn to that equipment, and for good reasons. They liked the amount of opportunities it provided, not just for just kids in general, but for different ages and for kids with all abilities to interact and engage together, and it for really to be kind of generational equipment as well. So, and Lee is a local vendor. All the labor in that will be local from Blumell's, and then they're also located in the Cambridge, Wisconsin area.
Questions?
So the picture that we see here, that's what we would.
I'll show you, yeah. Well, there should have been 2 pictures.
Yeah,
Both,
that's
yeah.
it. So is
But
that-
this,
Yes,
yep,
that's, okay.
yep, that's the equipment. And then there'll be, we're looking to add an additional piece that came up in the conversations, and it's like a zip line. type of feature. So the one, though, that Lee provides won't fit in our space size-wise, so we were going to just contract that out to a different vendor.
Other questions? I just had a quick question on the funding. So it says in the executive summary, Fund 80 balance will be allocated toward the project along with funding from 21-22 operating budget. Does that mean Fund 10?
No, Fund 80. Yeah,
Still Fund 80. So
it's
it's all
Fund
coming
80.
from Fund 80.
Yep, yeah,
Got it. So it's an operating budget plus the balance that you have.
correct.
Got it. Okay. All right, that's all the questions I had. If no other ones, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes.
All right, thank you, and everyone have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you, you as well. All right, so that finishes our regular meeting agenda items. We have a workshop. Do we need to take a break before we go into the workshop, or do you want to just roll right into it?
Roll.
Everyone's good?
Do it.
All right, so we'll move on to our 11.1 Financial Stability and Efficiency Facilities Update from Mr. Steve Eichmann.
Thank you. There's been a few changes since I gave it to the FSE committee last week. They asked some questions, and so based on the questions that they asked, I incorporated that into the PowerPoint. So, here's the agenda of what we'll be going over tonight. And I know it looks like a lot, and it's like 56 slides, but there's a lot of pictures, so I think it will go relatively quickly. And then I thought I'd start with the rationale for facilities management. And it creates integrated plans that account for the complexities and interdependencies of the services provided, ensure that facilities are lean, flexible, and effective. And I'm not going to read all of them, and provide an environment that enables efficient execution of core functions, which is educating our students. And then we had some vacancies in the facilities department, and every time there's vacancies, I always take that as an opportunity to take a step back and say, do we have the right personnel or the right positions to make the department run as efficiently as possible? And we had that opening because Tim Detloff, who was the custodial services supervisor, retired. Since then, we've hired Bill Fredericks, and he comes with us with a lot of not only school background, but also a supervisory background. And in the month or so that he's been here, he's really worked with me well. We've done, already started streamlining some of the processes and the procedures, working on accountability for everybody, making sure everybody understands what the expectations are, so they're clear on that, because I've always been a firm believer that it's difficult to hold somebody accountable if they don't know what's expected of them. So the first step is making sure they understand exactly what it is that we're expecting from them. And then the assistant custodial services supervisor position, transferred them into a maintenance technician. We had a maintenance technician in the budget, but it was vacant. And so we needed the help in the facilities department. And this individual had been a pod leader, so they had some mechanical background. They had done done work like that in the past. So it seemed to make sense to do that. And then also we've posted for the assistant custodial services supervisor, and then Bill will participate in those interviews as well. So here's just some non-CIP projects that were completed and/or purchases that were made. And when I first started, people would, from the facilities department, would email me and say, well, I'd like to buy this. And I'd say, well, that's great, but why do you want to buy it? What's the need? How's it going to benefit the department and all that? So now they've all, when they want to purchase something, they'll say, well, here's what we want to purchase. Here's what it will replace. Here's how it's going to help us efficiency-wise. Here's how it'll help us safety-wise. So we always, so I've got them now so that they look at everything that way, and they don't just ask. They say, here's why. Here's how it will benefit the department. So one of those is an electric pallet jack. The nice thing about an electric pallet jack is that number one is you just push the button and it'll move it forward or backward. The other, in terms of a safety stamp, which makes it safe to begin with, but then the other part is that if you're backing up and you run into a wall, if the handle hits you, what it does is it automatically stops and then moves the pallet in the other direction as well. So it's safer for everybody that's using it as well. We did some flooring replacement. We completed the installation of the bottle filling stations, because as you know, we we disconnected or covered up all of the drinking fountains. We ordered cafeteria tables for all the district's schools that said they needed them. And then through one of our insurance companies, we had infrared testing done of all of our electrical pumps and motors and our supply closets at Central, Dotke, and Hale. And each one came back with about a 45-page report. I'm happy to announce everything passed with flying colors. And like I said, it was through our insurance company, so it was no cost to the district.
You're looking at heat then?
Yes.
Yeah.
Looking to see if something's operating at too high of a temperature, and everything came back operating great.
Good.
We had purchased and installed some additional security cameras. We did a little library installation at Walker, which doesn't sound like much, but it was really neat because what we did is there was a group at Walker of students, and the teacher and the students reached out and asked if this was something we could do and what would be the first steps that they should go through, because they wanted to use it as a learning experience. And so we said, went through and said, well, the first thing we need to do is call Digger's Hotline, determine where it's going to go, and went through all of that. And then it had the maintenance crew come out there, and this class even came out there and watched them dig the hole and mark it and all of that. Then what we did is we installed it, and they were out there for that as well. So it was really nice, and they've had to replace the books several times since then. So it was kind of nice to get everybody involved. And then my daughter-in-law works for a landscape company. So what it did then is I created a PowerPoint that the teachers could use for the students that talked about different zones, the different planting zones and that, and then what you would plant and the different types of plants that may go around that. So it was really nice to be involved with that, and I know the maintenance guys really liked being there and working with the students as well. We did some asbestos abatement. We replaced windscreens at the athletic complex. We removed the sign from up on the top of 1135, the old sign. We removed that. We did some brick repair and then also repaired some curb inlets. Repaired the loading dock at Frank Lloyd Wright. Did some outdoor sign replacement at the main entrance at Dotke. I did some railing repair, playground equipment repair, and gym floor refinishing at a couple of sites. Installed new logos, the signs in the buildings, but then also on the district vehicles. Did ceiling tile replacement, did some painting, some gate replacement, concrete repair, and then we removed the old rusty ticket booths that were at the West Dallas Athletic Conference. And then when we removed those, we discovered that there was a concrete pad that was uneven and looked bad, so we removed that as well. So, not big items, but they're things that help make it look nicer, I think. Some of the CIP projects that we completed were paving at Pershing and Walker. And at Walker, if you remember, the dumpster was almost in the middle of the parking lot. And so what we did is we moved that to the edge of the parking lot. And so now we worked with the building principal and the paving company, but then also the striping company. And we made the bus turnaround a little shorter now because it doesn't have to go all the way around the dumpsters. So that was a nice little thing, I thought, that made it look a little nicer. And then we did roofing at the sites that are listed here. And for those that are new to the board, when I do the update next year, you may see some of these same sites on there for roofing. The reason is because we have all of our roofs are broken down into sections. So at 8, depending on the size of a building, there could be 7 or 8 different sections for a building. So we look at it by what are the worst ones that need to be done. So at any particular school, we may do 1 or 2 sections one year, and if the next year some of the other sections need to be repaired, we'll do those as well. But we're not redoing the entire roof every time.
Steve,
Yes.
what, built up or rubber or?
We've been replacing with what's in kind,
Okay, thank you.
and we have a mixture of all of We did tennis court resurfacing at Hale. We also replaced the tennis nets and then replaced the little part that goes on top. Because if you don't, I learned through all this that if you don't have that on top, then the nets wear out faster because the balls are always hitting the top. Refurbished the main entrance at Jefferson because the salt in the winter had taken a toll on the metal. Remodeled the metals lab at Hale. We also installed new exterior double doors. The reason I bring that up is the old doors would not stay shut, so they had put brackets on the inside of it with a 2x4 on, which was a code violation. So we replaced it, the double doors. Now they don't have to do that, and you can use it to go out as well. It added additional air compressor lines at Central and the CTE areas, an outdoor learning space at Jefferson. Working with Steve Cosner, we did some kitchen remodeling, and then we did roll filter replacement and air purification system installation at Hoover. What happened at some of the AHUs there is you actually had the roll filter that comes in the roll, so we replaced it so now we can use the MERV filters there. Did concrete and retaining wall work at Walker. On the far side, the opposite end of the parking lot, there was an old asphalt area that really kind of went to nowhere, and the gate was all broken. So what we did is we put in a small retaining wall, we built a new ADA compliant ramp and put a new gate in. So now students coming from that side of the school community can actually access the school from that side. Plus, I also had reports that in the winter, it was really slippery over there, and so there were a lot of students that were falling and parents, so it should make it safer as well. Did some retaining wall repairs, installation of video boards, again, working with Steve Cosner. Dry pond construction at Hale, which is over on the West Cleveland Avenue side. And that's a follow-up to the work that we did for the parking lot at Hale, because we had to retain a certain amount of rainwater, and so this was our response to do that. So we worked with the city and the state to get that taken care of.
The retaining wall at Jefferson, I'm trying to picture, is that along the alley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Did shop door replacement at Central. It was difficult to shut that. Sometimes it would take two people to shut it or open it. Again, that's a safety issue if somebody's trying to get out. And then we're working with the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District on a green infrastructure program at Mitchell. And that should be completed in the next several weeks. There was a portion of it that we needed state approval for that MMSD didn't know that we needed that either. So that was kind of a little kink that got thrown in there at the end, but I've worked with the gentleman from MMSD and made them aware now so that they know that going forward. Gave them the contact information at the state so they'll be able to tell other entities that they work with that this is what's required when you do certain parts of it. Here's a before picture of some of our concrete. When I said that we do concrete work, this is some of what our steps in our look like. And then you can see that on the left-hand side, this is the replacement steps now, what they look like. And then you can see that ADA compliant ramp that was updated as well at one of the sites. Yes.
When you redo that concrete, are you coating it? Are you basically getting rid of the loose stuff and then putting a new coat on, or are you taking it down and building it back up?
In the case of the ramp, we took it down and we rebuilt it because what was there wasn't compliant. And so whenever we can and it makes sense, we make it ADA compliant. But in some cases, depending, we may do a combination of both, depending on how bad it is.
Okay.
Where it makes sense and it's still going to last for a number of years, we'll just repair what's there. But in some cases, we just tear it out and we put in new. And then you can see some more. And then on the bottom, that's the new walkway that goes to the Walker Playground. So it's a new gate that can be opened before and after school, but then it can also be locked and secured during the day. And on the bottom right-hand side, where you can see the grass there, that was all broken up asphalt. It was all uneven. So we took out the gate that was unusable over there, took out the asphalt and put in grass.
And I just wanted to note that I actually had a community member email us about the Walker thing, and gave high, like, thought it looked really great. So I just wanted to let you know that the people in the community do notice, you know, even these small things that you guys are doing to keep our facilities up.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, I've talked with the principal several times, and she said it's used all the time. So that's what we want, and we want them to be safe while they're using it, so. And then on the top, there's a couple of classrooms at different sites where they had a common wall, and we put doors in between the classrooms. So now they can, you know, they can work together as a group. And at the bottom are a couple pictures of the new dot key sign that was installed. And this is the first two, the one on the far left and the picture in the middle. Those are of the refurbished entrance to Jefferson. And then also in one of the rooms that was redone, it was room 214. At one of the sites, we put in a window in between the where the teachers are and then where the students are. Then here's just some pictures of the paving that we did, and then you can see the new dumpsters where they're located now at the edge of the parking lot. And then on the bottom left, some of the playgrounds, they weren't on our priority list in terms of replacing them all, but what we did at some of them then is we went in and we repainted all of the lines that were on the playground. So even though the playground wasn't to the point where it all needed to be resurfaced, we did repaint some of the lines on some of them. This is some more parking lot. The top two are the parking lot at Central. And then at the bottom, it's on the bottom left, it's the West Dallas Athletic Complex, the entrance there, and then we also replaced the sidewalk there as well. And this is just some more of the striping that we did. And then on the bottom, or the far right, that's the little library that was installed at Walker. And then in some of the classrooms, we've gotten away from going with carpet, just for, you know, it's a little healthier to not have the carpet, and so we've gone with some of the vinyl planks, and so these are what some of the classrooms look like. In talking with the teachers after they had used it for a while, they absolutely love it. They said it's so much nicer than the carpet. And there's just some more of it, and then we replaced the curtain divider at one of the sites. It was all torn and it didn't work very well. Now it moves back and forth freely, and especially now with COVID, we can divide it and we can have two different classes in there.
What school is that?
I believe it was Mitchell.
Okay.
And then here are some pictures of the new metals lab at Hale. Each one of the welding stations has its own exhaust system. So before we had an exhaust system, but it didn't work very well. Now they each have their own. And then we have a new, you can see where it all exhausts outside. And if you look at the top middle picture on the very right-hand or very left-hand side, you can see a little L shape up there. That's all the electrical conduit. I was there watching them put that in. They actually measure all of that conduit to make sure that the spacing is the same from every single one of those conduits. Yes?
Maybe you can't answer this, but you said that it needed to be replaced because they weren't working properly. Is that because we maybe took shortcuts years ago doing it, or just that it's got a certain lifespan and that's it?
It's more that it was, you know, it's reached the end of its useful life.
Okay, thank you.
I know you've heard that before, correct? And here are a couple of pictures of the outdoor classroom at Jefferson. It's not being used much now, but when the weather was nice, it was being used every day.
I'll tell you what, I really, driving down Beecher, really
It's cool.
Yeah, it is.
definitely catches your eye.
Yeah, it's a nice bright colors, and so it's really nice. And we worked with Lee Recreation for that as well.
I like it.
So, and here's just some pictures of the dry pond at Hale. And you can see, so we have on the top left, the reason you have that there is a drain, so that if we get a lot of rain and it doesn't all just seep, what it'll do is that'll take it and put it down into the sewer if we get too much rain. But eventually that'll all be covered with grass. It's just that at the time of the pictures were taken, it hadn't grown yet. And there again, we worked with the city of West Dallas and the state on that, and here's some more pictures after they were a little further along.
Is that kind of behind the soccer field?
It is.
Okay.
We had to, when we were digging it out a little bit, we had to encroach a little bit on the soccer field, but I had worked with the athletic directors and with Mrs. Strasser so that they knew when it was coming. And then they got it right back after they were done. And they still can use the soccer field exactly where it was.
Thank you.
And this is at Mitchell. This was that program I was telling you about with Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District. On the top right, those are the cisterns that we put in. What they're designed to do is we'll take the runoff from the roof and we'll tie it into the downspouts. It'll collect in the cisterns and then it'll have a filter on those tanks and it'll go out into the groundwater slowly. This is the part that the Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewer District didn't know that we needed to have state approval for. So that's the part that we've been working on the last couple of weeks is we had to have a master plumber and then we also had to work with the state. So that's why that's still been sitting like that. It's not that we forgot about it, it's just that we couldn't do any more work until we received state approval. And then we have trees that we planted, but we also have some additional trees that were planted. And then on the bottom right, that is a prairie landscape, some native plants that have been planted. They just, they didn't have a chance to really do much after they were put in, but next spring, we'll take care of those, and if anything needs to be replaced, we will. And then, excuse me, the picture on the left is some more of the metals lab at Hale. Then the middle picture is where we rented a bucket truck and then we were replacing some of the bells on the outside of the buildings that didn't work and the speakers. And then the picture on the right is a new slide that was installed. I received a couple of calls from the public about why it was taking so long to replace that slide. And I said, well, I ordered it in June. It came the end of September. But then once I received it, I had to call the contractor to install it because we want a licensed installer to put it in. And it took them almost 4 weeks to get us into their schedule. So unfortunately, in the past, we could have done that probably all inside of a month or less, but with everything going on, it took a lot longer than what we had hoped it would. And then here's some more, I'll start with the bottom left. You can see that's what the loading dock did look like, all the way across. And then you can see on the bottom right what it looks like now.
Oh.
And that was a case of where we saw cut some of the front part of the loading dock off, and then we replaced it, put in a wood beam, and then we put in the new rubber. So we didn't replace the entire part of it, we just took off what we needed to. And then the top left, that's a new railing that was put in. None of those railings were there. And I received a call from the principal saying that there were a couple of students that, because that's where most of the students exit, and they have difficulties walking. So to get down those stairs to get to their parents, they had to sit on their bottom and go down the stairs that way. So as soon as I called that, I called one of our contractors and said, okay, this is what we need to do. This needs to be a priority. So you can't tell very well here, but the railing in the middle is actually more of a rectangle. So it's all one piece. And the students now, if they go down the part that's closest to us, they can actually put one hand on each side. And even if they don't, they can walk down now by themselves and not have to sit on their bottom. So, because we didn't want, obviously we don't want them to do that, but we also didn't want them to have to go out another exit different from where everybody else was going.
Do I know what school it is?
What school is this, Steve?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask. I believe it was Madison.
It's not Madison.
No,
Not that kind of work at Madison.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. I know
That's
we do
okay.
so
I was
many
just
of them, but
All right.
no, that's
Is
okay.
it Franklin?
It could be. We did so many things that I get them mixed up sometimes, but
I was just curious.
it worked out really well, and it was something that I never would have thought of, just looking at that and not being a railing there. But there again, fortunately, the principal called up and said, this is what's going on, and we took care of it as quickly as we could. And then this is the tennis courts that were resurfaced and then repainted, and we also took out we leveled it out so that some of the low spots that were there where the water would collect, it doesn't do that anymore.
Those are movable, right?
Pardon me?
Those are movable,
The nets?
all of it?
No, the,
I'm joking, Steve.
oh, okay.
Oh, wow.
Inquiring minds want to know.
No, but the nets can be removed, and they will be, and they haven't always been in the past, and that
In the
contributes to them,
wintertime? Right.
not lasting as long. So down some of the items that we're looking at, proposing for this year still, if we have enough time and money, is fence replacement at Horace Mann. Again, some roll filter replacement, retaining wall work, and then replace an ADA ramp at Madison. And then one of the things that we have too is, it says Green Infrastructure Project at Horace Mann. And this is something that we're working with a company called Greenprint Partners. And this is for the courtyard at Horace Mann. And I know it's difficult to see all these little things, but everything on the right-hand side, and it goes to 25. There'll be 25 different stations and/or features that will be there. And this one will show you a little bit better. Excuse me. These are some of the features that will actually be included in that courtyard. So it'll really be able to be used by, a couple of classes at a time, and also there'll be a wide variety of things that can be done there at the same time. And in working with them, I think everything will be accessible as well, whether you're ambulatory or non-ambulatory. So there's some parts like where the slide is, that grass part there, obviously a wheelchair wouldn't go down there, but there are ramps that are ADA compliant that they'll be able to go up and down as well.
Where is this located?
Horace Mann in the courtyard. The only way you can get to the courtyard is from inside the school.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about in the initial stages of this, we talked about different things that we could do, given that, anything that we needed to do where you needed major equipment, or if there were huge pieces of equipment, we'd have to get a crane and lower them in that way, which is expensive.
Yeah.
Then if you have to maintain it, like if you wanted to put in, say for example, asphalt, how do you resurface it without going through the school or lifting everything over? So in working with the designers and the company, we came up with all of this, so. And that is scheduled to go in this coming summer.
Great. Jane, did you have a question?
And I don't know if this is an appropriate time, so just tell me if we would table this, but, as we talk about the safety of the schools, and these are all projects that will be coming up, what about the safety of the doors and, especially at the high schools, and are they all, up to code as far as security? I know we got grants in the past to make sure that we had double doors and all of those things. Like, is that something that you work on? Is that, so
Yeah.
we would come to you and ask you to look into that,
Yes.
cameras, any
Yep.
other security things?
Yes.
Is that something that we
Yes.
might?
And with like the door at Central that we replaced, the head custodian there, he had me come out there, we looked at it, and said, here's
Right.
what the problem is, he showed me, I got to, try it firsthand. But then also principals and the custodians will let me know, well, we're having problems with this door, or, we have this that we need you to look at. We have a blind spot here on the playground. Because
Right.
especially now when we are looking at using more entrances and exits at the beginning and at the end of school. We didn't have cameras at all of those entrances, so now we made sure that we had cameras in, or where it was possible, what we did is we replaced the camera that was there and put in a camera where we could do a panoramic view. So we didn't necessarily have to add a camera, we just upgraded what we had.
Okay.
So, yeah, so everybody always makes me aware of those things, and then we look at them, and then the nice thing is that our master electrician, he can do low voltage work as well, so he can do most of this all on his own.
So if there's a security concern that's brought up to you, Gene, then yeah, you could either refer them directly to Steve, or you could bring the concern to Steve and say, this is what I need.
Right.
Yeah.
I just didn't know if it was appropriate time to talk about that with you, or if you were the person that we would talk to, because obviously.
Yeah, and with the
security
last
concerns
two.
are paramount right now.
And with the last two security entrances we did, the West Milwaukee Intermediate School, and then the one at Irving, those were the last two buildings that didn't have the secured entrances.
Right.
So, and that was partially funded through a DOT grant. So
Mhm.
all of them now have security entrances. Replacement of the football field at the West Dallas Athletic Conference, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in some subsequent slides. Renovation of the kitchen area at Dot Key, gate replacement at some of the parking lots, locker removal and shelving installation at Horace Mann. They proposed that, and then some paving and roofing again. And paving and roofing are those standards that we do every single year. Looking at doing some flooring replacement, asbestos removal, and that's all determined by what projects we're doing at different sites. Ceiling tile replacement as needed. Door installation's been requested between some classrooms at Longfellow. Again, concrete repair, swimming pool and deck repairs. I think you saw some of the pictures at one of our facilities updates, when we're doing the long-range facilities master plan, you saw some of the rebar coming out. That was at West Milwaukee underneath the pool. And then we're gonna switch gears now and some proposal. I was approached by AT&T, and they want to construct cell towers at 4 of our sites. One is at Hoover, Dot Key, West Milwaukee, and the Recreation Center. And the one at Hoover would be in the parking lot or by the end of the parking lot. One at Dot Key would be on the rooftop. West Milwaukee, it'd be at the far end of the parking lot by the bleachers and by a light pole that's currently there. And then at the Recreation Center behind the new garage. That one would be one of those mono poles that goes up, could be 75 to 80 feet. And all I've done is I've had some initial discussions with them, told them what the process was. I took it to the FSC committee, said that I would bring it here, and that I would get back to them if it was something that you wanted me to pursue further. Still making no commitments, but just talk to them and get additional information. They would say what's standard for them is they'd have long-term leases of 25 to 30 years typically. And if we were to sell a site for whatever reason, it had a tower there, then the lease would transfer to the new owner, and so would the revenue that was coming from that tower. And right now, they're estimating it's $1,000 a month per tower. And then, like I said, that we would continue discussions if there's interest in pursuing it. And one of the questions that was asked at the FSC committee is what's usually the biggest obstacle to people wanting to put that in, and it's the aesthetics. People don't want to look at the tower. If it's on the rooftop, it's not so big, obviously, because you're accounting for the height of the building already. But like the one at the Recreation Center, and I think you've all seen those poles where it's just a monopole that goes up, and then it has the 3 or 4 the receivers or whatever on the top. And then I included some before and after pictures of what they're saying that it would potentially look like. And I apologize, some of these, they're not very clear pictures, but on the right-hand side, I always tried to put a yellow circle around where the new pole is, so you could tell the difference. And this is at West Milwaukee. This is they're proposing the one at the Recreation Center would look like. And the next couple of slides are just showing it from different angles of what it would look like. And then this is at Dot Key, and it's the rooftop, and it's really hard to see it there, but those stick up about 12 feet. There's 4 of them that stick up. That would be on the roof at Dot Key. I guess I should go back. So is there any questions about that, or is that anything that you'd like me to continue working with them? Because I told him that I was taking it to the FSE committee, and then I was bringing it back tonight, and before I came to this meeting, he called and said, do you have any word yet? And I said, no, I haven't taken it to the full board, and I told you that's what I would need to do before we could go anywhere.
Thoughts?
I guess I'm kind of I don't know a lot about this, so what would be the benefits of us doing something like this?
$12,000 a year.
$48,000 a year.
Yeah.
Okay.
They pay us
Yeah,
$1,000
$1,000
per
goes to
site.
us per month.
I knew that there was like a payment, I just didn't know how much.
Yeah, I know. The first thing I was like, we're paying them $1,000? Like when I first heard it, and then they're,
I just didn't know how much money was involved. I
right?
don't know
And-
a lot.
Yeah. So
and
that's
typically it-
$4,000 a month.
And with each one of these, I have documentation. There's about 40 or 50 pages of documentation with all this. And typically, because I've done this in other districts, worked with them, they typically try to put it in areas where it makes sense for them, because maybe they don't have as good a reception in a certain area as they do in others. And so they're trying to even out that, the cell service, or the signal strength, I should say. And I know that it's come up in the past too, that there's concerns about, any waves that may be going out or whatever, but the one person from AT&T told a different board at one time is that, the signal in that is not going down, because the whole point of it being up high is because they want it to go out. So, they said, we're never gonna say never in terms of could something happen, but the whole premise of having it up high like that is so it's up above most everything and it goes out.
Did I hear correct? It's $4,000 per tower? And did I hear you say there'd be 4 towers on Dotkey?
No, it's $1,000 per site.
Oh,
It's
per
just-
site, okay.
It's just that Dotkey, for whatever reason, the type of antenna or whatever they're putting there is it's like 4 or 5 of them that go across there.
Thanks.
But what they've said, they're estimating right now is $1,000 per site per month. But that could change between now and when we get to the point. And the other is that they're responsible for, if we decide to go ahead, they're responsible for all the construction costs. The district doesn't pay for any of that. Yes.
What about maintenance of those, and if something happens to them, either vandalism or weather-related, is it something that it falls over into the parking lot or something like that, and we can't touch it because it's not our property, and so now it's sitting there until they get somebody out there to deal with it? Is that, what would the sort of agreement be on that? And do they have to have access? That's on the roof of Dotkey, so if they have to go up there to do something with it, we have to provide access to them. What's the process for doing that too? Because they can't just do it from the outside.
Yeah, that would always be spelled out in the lease, and one of the things that I've done when I've done this in other districts is that, and unless it's an emergency, they only can come before or after school, if it's a school day, or they can come on non-school days. If it's an emergency, then they're responsible for getting somebody out there within 12 to 24 hours is what it's typically been.
Okay.
Yes.
So, the $1,000 a site, a month sounds really good, really interesting, but, is there some type of negotiation where like maybe we could work some kind of deal on our internet provider, or, something that might net us some more return versus just $48,000 sounds great, but in the grand scheme of our budget, it's really kind of a,
Yeah.
It's a man.
No.
but I would prefer to exchange maybe some services.
No,
for
I
that
agree.
type of thing, or,
And I'm a firm believer of it never hurts to ask.
right.
Because the worst they can tell you is no, and then you're no worse off than you were before. So I always ask them, 20 different questions about is this the best? Tell me what you're doing at comparable, areas around here. What are you paying them, and why
Right,
are
do
you
we know
paying
that
them?
$1,000 is a good deal, or is that just a number, or?
We don't. I just haven't invested enough time to do all of that yet, just because I didn't know if it's something that you as a board would even willing to pursue. Because I know, some boards are like, well, let's just kick it down, let's just kick the can down the road and see what they can offer. And others are just like, no, you know what, I don't want to do it at all. In a district I was at in California, we got to the whole part where we had the agreement, and the board looked at it and said, you know what, we just don't feel it's worth the trouble, we're not going to do it.
I mean, I definitely think it's worth
Looking into.
exploring and, looking into monetary or other ways of getting
Okay.
some return.
I have Verizon, so I'm less invested in this, but,
Me as well.
the Verizon
At
wants to
home I
come
have
in, now let's talk, no. The only concern, the only location I have concerns about is Hoover, just because at these other, and there's no pictures of where it would be at Hoover, so I couldn't see where it would actually be going. But these other locations, you know, you got giant light poles already there, on top of a roof, it doesn't matter. But the Hoover one, there isn't a lot of big tall stuff around by it, and so that's the only thing that I was concerned about aesthetically. If there would be a concern from neighbors about putting that in. That's the only one. The other ones, I think that people wouldn't even notice that it was there after it was, you know, construction was done on it or whatever.
Yeah, and that's, like I said, that's the number one concern that people have, and what I've done in the past, with the, you know, with the approval of the board, is we've gone to the neighborhood and put out flyers and said, this is what's being proposed, it's gonna be on the board topic
Yeah.
on this date. And then if they wanna come and speak about it, pro or con,
Yeah.
then they have an opportunity to do that.
Okay.
No.
Just stretching.
Yeah, just stretching.
So, I mean,
The
in
other
general,
thing-
go ahead.
I would, you know, explore, obviously our buildings are pretty spread out throughout the cities and, you know, other locations as well, because I'm sure 4 is the starting point, but.
Did they evaluate the area and just
you know,
identify
is
our
West Milwaukee
sites?
a valuable spot where it's located, or is it already bombarded by towers anyway, you know?
Well, West Milwaukee Intermediate School is one of them they proposed.
Yeah.
And they looked at them, but it's interesting, they originally came to me with 3 sites, and then probably a month or a month and a half after they initially reached out, I received a forwarded email from Suzette and/or Caitlin saying, well, they wanted to know about Hoover. And so when I got the email forwarded to me, I looked at the names, it was the same people that I'd been dealing with, so I reached out to them and said, why did you send it to them? I'm the one you should be, oh, he goes, I wondered about that. So, but that's always the question I can ask him as well. Have you looked at, you know, all of the sites? Yeah.
So you sparked a little bit of a thought in my mind as far as, so, you know, obviously if AT&T is willing to do this, you know, what is Verizon's opinion? And how can we maybe leverage that into,
A bidding war.
you know, I'm just saying, to
Yeah.
our advantage, a better win for us. There's
I'd have
nothing
to-
wrong with bringing in a competitor to ask what their thoughts are.
Definitely.
I mean, do we have a partnership with AT&T, or AT&T just approached us and now they've opened up Pandora's box for us?
They just approached us, but I can always reach out to Verizon. Because what I don't know with Verizon, and even before this, I didn't know with AT&T either, is where do they have towers already?
Right.
And
This is new to
Verizon may
us.
have them, you know, in areas that they are servicing all these, but there again, doesn't hurt to ask. Reach out and say, you know, here's what we're looking at. Yes?
I know for sure Verizon doesn't have anything near Hoover because my cell service is horrible in my house. So, they would probably be super interested in that one. But I also don't know, sometimes they lease signal from other carriers. So like they're not putting up towers we'd have towers on every street if that was the case. So it may be that AT&T is gonna put the money into doing it and then they'll lease it to Verizon. But, yeah, I think it'll depend on who has the towers in the area.
That
and
sounds like
what they'll
kind
go
of
with.
a
But-
leveraging point.
But if we
Kind
can
of a-
get like a percentage off our internet or something like that, that would probably be better long-term and savings for the district as opposed to, you know, $48,000, which to you and
Maybe
me
we
is a
can do
lot
a
of
little
money,
bit
but
of
to our
both.
district is not.
Yeah.
It's
No, I'll
pay for a
definitely
lot.
ask them.
So I think that we have a
Intrigues me
thumb,
more that the more we talk about it.
I think we have a thumbs up on exploring it further, we have a
Yeah.
general consensus on that. So let's
Okay.
explore it further, see what we can get, and then I would like to see where it's gonna go at Hoover, if you could, you know,
Okay.
do one of these pictures like that for Hoover too. I think of all the ones, that would be the one that's probably the most concerning for the neighbors in the area.
Okay, I will do that. Okay, now we're gonna talk about Fund 46.
All right.
It's the Long-Term Capital Improvement Trust Fund, and it was created by the board on October 23rd of 2017. And I'll get back to why that date is important and why I put it in there. But the goal is to utilize these funds to support and supplement our annual $1.2 million CIP budget. Some of the larger cost projects that require approved long-term capital improvement plan. And the CIP plan that's associated with this fund has to be at a minimum of 10 years long. It can be changed throughout that plan. The dollar amount of the projects can be changed. The order that the projects are done can be changed, but it all has to be part of and included in the CIP plan, and it has to be approved by the board. And the funds can only be used for the purposes identified in the approved long-range CIP. But there again, I had a conversation with the DPI, and we can change that, what we have in there and what we don't have in there. Like I said, it just needs to be board approved. And then the initial approved long-range CIP was for 2 items. It was to replace the Field 1 at WAC, which is the football field, and then Field 2, which is the soccer field. And the estimated cost at the time that the field was the fund was created was $1 million for each. And given some initial conversations that I've had with a vendor that would be working with through TIPS, which is a national purchasing consortium, $1 million for each seems to be right in the ballpark of what it would be.
Would that include any of the extra equipment that we didn't have to be able to maintain the fields properly so they can extend their life?
No, and I've actually looked into that with our field, and given what the cost of the equipment is, it's less expensive for the district to just hire somebody to come out and do it 2 times a year.
Okay, are we doing that?
Yes.
Oh, great.
We have since I've been here. I don't know
You don't
about
if we had
before then.
that? Okay.
And a couple of things that we've had to do through COVID and all that is when we had a football playoff, I don't know, a year and a half ago. And so when I was approached by the athletic directors, they said, because it already had snowed, and we had snow on the field. And unfortunately, we're not like Lambeau where we can turn on the heaters for the field and it all melts. So they said, well, how do you get that off there? Well, I did some research, and what we ended up doing is we took our Kubotas, had the plow on it, then we took PVC pipe and cut the one top part of it, slipped it over the blade, and then we put that down on the field, and then we slowly pushed the snow off. So now we had to do that again this year too. We had to take the snow and get that off of there. So and there's a couple of interesting options that come with these fields that weren't there before. One is our goalpost right now is they're in an 8-foot by 10-foot piece of slab of concrete. It's about 6 foot deep, and so the goalposts are there and they're not moving. They have goalposts now that they're stationary, but you can actually turn the whole goalpost around. So like if you were to have graduation or something like that, you can actually have the stage closer to it, and it doesn't interfere with it. There's also the type where you can get it where it's hydraulic, and the field would actually open up, and you'd push a couple, do a couple of, loose a couple of screws in that. You push a button, and the entire goalpost goes down underneath the ground. And so it's not there at all. So, everything comes with a cost, but that is something that you could do as well. And then again, you can put it away for the winter. If you're going to have graduation outside in the future, you could use the end zone because you wouldn't have the goalpost there either. And so some of the limitations regarding the Fund 46 activities and then access to the funds is that they may only be accessed 5 years after the establishment of the trust fund, which in our case would be October 24th of 2022. And that's why I put the date in before of when it was created, because we can't legally access the funds until October 24th of this year, or of next year, apologize. And also the fund balance may not be used for general fund cash flow purposes, and I mean the Fund 46 fund balance. It can't be transferred to another fund or liquidated, and the loaning of money for other purposes or to other funds is not allowed. Because one of the questions I asked the DPI is, well, could we fund it from Fund 10 if we were to replace the field this summer? Because if we replace it this summer, it's going to be done before August, but we don't actually have access to the money until October. And they said, no, you can't access it until then. Once we get past that date, we can access it anytime for any project as long as it's board approved. And it also has to be, the money has to be deposited in a segregated bank or investment account. And then, as you may remember, starting in 2017-8, that fiscal year, we were putting aside $325,000 a year, $200,000 for 5 years, for each of the 5 years for Field 1, which is the football field. And then it was $125,000 for 8 years, I believe, for the soccer field. And the $2 amounts that you see, the $1 million and the $625,000, that is expected, or what the balance will be for those two items at the end of this fiscal year, so in June 30th of 2022. Also, in the past, what the board has approved is move some additional funds that we had from the Fund 10 balance into Fund 46. They haven't been earmarked for anything yet, but they are there. And part of that is, the rationale behind that was that if we have a year where we don't have 1.2 or 1.3 million in the Fund 10 to be able to support that, then what we could do is maybe only have $750,000 from the Fund 10 balance. Well, then we could update the CIP plan for Fund 46 and then fund some of those projects out of there as well. And again, the estimated end at the end of fiscal year, the total amount in there estimated is to be $4.3 million. And as I said, football turf field, Field 1, was installed in 2014. It does have padding underneath it. And we planned it for the spring or summer of 2022 or 2023. Yes?
I'm sorry, I need to go back to the previous slide. So it says the cumulative budget is 5.925, so that's with the Field 1, Field 2, and then the remainder?
Yeah, so if you add all three lines at the bottom, the million, the 625,000, and the 4.3 million, that's how you get the,
So we have almost
it's covered up.
6 million, okay.
I'm sorry,
Right?
that little thing. So yeah, it's almost 6 million, sorry.
So we have almost 6 million at the end of this fiscal year.
Correct.
In the account.
Yep.
We've estimated that to replace both fields, it'll cost 2 million, even though we funded basically the football field completely initially with the 325 that we were putting in per year, and then not all of the soccer field apparently.
Yes.
So if we were going to replace both of those, I presume it'd be cheaper to do them at the same time. I guess that'd be something that's good to know.
Yeah, and that's something when you get to this,
Okay.
this
Sorry, I
slide
don't wanna
here.
jump ahead. And
Nope.
then the other funding
That's good.
money that we had were essentially gonna be, if we didn't have enough money to fund CIP, or there could be other possible uses that we either need or come across that we could use that money for, that we just have to essentially change or amend the plan that we put in place initially as a board, or a board would have to amend the plan to use those funds for something else, once we get past October of this coming year.
Yes, so what I'd do is I'd come back and say, here's what the CIP plan looks like now. Here's what I'm proposing it looks like. This is why I'm proposing that. And then the board will be able to discuss it and approve it if they so chose.
Okay. That's a pretty good chunk of money, though. I mean, we started out with the minimum, because that's what we thought what we could have put away, and because we had such big extras at the end of the year, we were able to put a lot more into it. But now with our finances being closer to that 2%, we're not gonna have that, like we did moving forward. So I think it's important for us to understand that, number one, and then realize that when we do spend this money, it's not gonna continually be able to replenish like it has been in the past anyway. So we wanna make sure that we're, I guess, picking projects wisely as far as that goes.
Yeah, and so then the soccer field replacement, that's field number 2, it was called in this, is that was estimated to be replaced in 2025. But I'm working with the vendor again, who's on TIPS, which is a National Purchasing Consortium, looking at, okay, if we were to sign a letter of intent, which doesn't obligate us to do anything, and we were to do the football field this year and then the soccer field in 2023 or 2024, could we lock in pricing now for both of those, even though we don't do both of them this coming summer? One of the things that I also talked with them about is that, because there's a potential timing issue with the funds not being available until the end of October of '22, but the field would actually be completed, I'm working with the presidents of the company saying, here's the situation we're in, would you be willing to do the work? And then we pay you in full at the end of October. And so they're discussing that internally to see if that's a possibility. The other thing that we could do is we just wait and we move it to 2023. The football field could, would be able to be used safely for another year. The other thing is that what we could do, again, is pay for it out of the football field replacement, pay it out of the Fund 10, use the CIP money that's there, and then move some of those CIP projects to the Fund 46 plan and do it that way as well.
I see.
By doing that particular move would allow us to get it started for potentially next football season, to get it done earlier.
It would be done in August. If we started it, because I've been talking with them probably for 6 or 9 months now, and so we're on everybody's schedule that if this were to be approved, that when we go forward with it, they would start the day after school is dismissed in the spring, and they would have it completed by the end of August. So, I don't know when the exact first home football game would be, but it would be pretty close to being completed by then.
I got a question too, so when would we have to have an answer by, as far as timing is concerned, because we have a referendum out there, so let's say we go to referendum, how easy is it to, or what would we be looking at as far as putting on the field? Are you gonna put Huskies and Bulldogs, and then, can that be easily repainted? I'm not familiar with how turf.
Not easily repainted, but I did have that discussion with them, and so what the scope of work would be is that they initially wouldn't put anything on the field, any designation, but part of the scope of work would be that they either come back at some point and they put on both of the logos, or they put on one new one at some point when that's determined.
Got a new logo right there.
Will that be this
Right,
middle
to
of
be
the
honest,
field too?
I know, yeah, right,
Yeah.
but,
It's something.
I think,
yeah, I would have no problem with that. I'm
I mean,
saying,
just with that comment and the fact that we have the time limitation on using the funds, I personally feel more comfortable just waiting until 2023, because we'll have the answer about the referendum, and the funds will be readily available. We don't have to worry about shuffling monies around. It gives us plenty of time to plan and line up. I'm not opposed to signing a letter of intent or anything like that, because this is something that we're going to do.
Mhm.
But I think that it lines up a little better time-wise if we do wait until have it being done in the summer of 2023, so it's ready for the fall of 2023. And then the money is all coming out of that pot, and we'll have the referendum answer. And then maybe we'll even have if it passes, maybe we'll even already have the new, name picked, so that we would be able to get that, maybe that's the first thing that's there, is there on the field.
Yeah, so that is a discussion that I had with them already, that we don't know. But that would solve that timing issue as well.
Just my initial thoughts on that anyways.
And then, as I talked about, we just have to create a revised 10-year CIP plan. It has to be at least 10 years. It can be longer, but it can at least be 10 years. And then, like I said, the projects may change, the order of the projects may change, and then the budget for the projects may change. And then traditionally, it was set up as for projects that we wouldn't necessarily be able to take out of the Fund 10 operating budget. And then we can, through that CIP plan, we can prioritize the projects and then ultimately always have board approval, so you know it's coming down the pipe then. This part is something this is a project that, these guidelines are something that I created. I went through the WASBO leadership program, and one of the things you had to do is create a project that would be something that would benefit the district. And so we have the CIP process that we go through, but we didn't have anything for what Caitlin and I came up with as the BIP. Instead of CIP, it's BIP, which is building improvement projects. And the purpose and the objective of doing this was to provide a district-wide process for review and approval of building improvement project proposals submitted by school personnel, create an equitable and identifiable process to submit, review, and approve the BIPs, and then equitable distribution of the district resources, And then ultimately ensure overall design compatibility for each site, and to assure that the improvements and the modifications are within the context of the long-range facilities master plan and also our strategic plan. And then to identify appropriate funding sources, and also to ensure that the projects are completed and they're successful. So some of the changes are the definition of the BIPs is that they're smaller projects that require an outside contractor or vendor and/or maintenance department assistance to complete. So it's not painting of a hallway or painting of a classroom or something like that. And then any project that would physically alter the building or the surrounding property from its current state, and it also isn't a CIP or a repair that would be done through the work order process. And then creation of the BIP standards so that we meet code requirements, safety requirements, and then also management of those projects. And then the individuals that have been involved so far have been some of the directors, the maintenance and custodial staff. And then I did present this to the FSE committee last week, but I also, after that, I presented it to the principals as well at the principal meeting last week as well. And what the results that we're looking for are uniformity and consistency in the application, assessment, and approval process. Approval of the projects will be based on specific goals and criteria that are measurable, accountable, objective, and budget-friendly. And right now, they appear to be more subjective, where it's first come, first served. If you ask first, then you get your project done. And we want to eliminate that so that there's equitability financially, programmatically, and geographically. So develop a communication plan to roll this out, and going to the committee and the principals and out to the full board is part of that communication plan. Then disseminate the guidelines, as there are 9-page guidelines that go with this, and then also a fillable PDF application form. And then gather feedback, listen to the concerns, issues, and impressions, and then make the appropriate changes. Because ultimately, we want it to be something that it achieves the objectives, but it's also easy to use and understand. Otherwise, people just won't use it. And then the impact, as I said, hopefully is that identification of a clear and equitable process for submitting the BIPs. It also would provide every requested project with an equal opportunity for review and approval. We can create a 5-year BIP plan that identifies the project, identifies the fiscal impact, and then we can prioritize those projects. And ultimately, whatever projects we do, we want to make sure that they're successfully completed. And this is a little difficult to see, but this is the next 3 pages are the application, and it is fillable. But again, at the highlighted yellow part, that just talks about the definition or the difference between a CIP, a BIP, and a work order. And then at the very bottom, you can see the total project cost, because we want to know, what's the initial cost to do this project, but then are there any ongoing costs that maybe you can't fund it all in 1 year, so you'll split it over 2 years. And then on this page, it's the operating costs, year over year. Are there any, in addition to the initial costs, are there any operational costs that that are going to take either maintenance staff time, or it's something you're going to have an outside contractor come in and do each year? And if there's a cost associated with that, we want to identify that here as well. And then some of the questions in terms of project criteria, there are 13 questions. And just, does the project preserve or improve student, staff, community health, safety, and welfare? If you look at number 8, is the project in conformance with and supportive of the goals, strategies, and actions set forth in our strategic plan? So there's a whole series of questions like that that are asked for each program or for each project that is submitted. And then ultimately, you just have the building principal, we need them to approve it. It would be approved by myself and then also by Caitlin. And then it would come to the board as well and say, here's the projects that we're looking at. Yes?
Is there any space for, does the project support student learning, as in like project-based learning? Or did I miss that?
Number 5 says, does this program support programmatic development? If
Okay.
so, how, what grades?
Great, thank you.
Because I wanted to make sure that.
For example, Steve, like what you did over at Franklin when they did the collaboration station room, would that be an example of a BIF, the building?
Yes.
improvement?
Yes.
So something like that.
Yes. But like I said, I've had a couple, after I met with the principals, they said, well, we're gonna paint this hallway or part of this hallway. Is that something? I said, no, that's not something that, because you're not altering the physical space, and you don't necessarily need maintenance help or an outside contractor to come in and do that either, so. It's just some of those projects that otherwise just kind of slip through the cracks, if you will. This is just a way of identifying them, but making sure everything's done equitably, and everybody's treated the same and fairly. And, you know, one of the things you learn about the different colors of personalities, and so I learned that I was a gold, which means I like structure, I like to have processes and procedures. Works out very well, because as you may know, Caitlin is the same way.
What?
Yeah.
It's brand new information.
And then the long-range facilities master plan update, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, because you guys have been living this the last couple of months. But I just go down towards the bottom part where we had the survey results on November 15th. Received a recommendation on next steps from the board on the 15th, and then we're looking at possible referendum in April of 2022. And that is it. So are there any additional questions or comments?
Bill?
So, this is not really a question, this is just a topic of conversation. And so talking about the field had my mind thinking about, naming the school, the referendum, and ultimately we agreed with the FAC committee and that the one high school is the direction that we feel is the way to go. Putting a question like naming the school and getting the community involved in naming the school, and at what opportunity or what moment in time do we bring that subject up? Is that something that we could put on, like the referendum question, as an additional question? If you support the referendum, would you be willing to name, I know we have 6 months before we get it on the ballot or whatever, but, because I think creating some community excitement and having the opportunity to pick what ultimately we want to name our West Dallas High School, if that's where we go, along with the football, creating the field and the mascot that we're gonna maybe have, adopt and that sort of thing. Could that be something that we're working towards to the referendum question as well?
I would love for the kids to be the part of developing that name.
Sure, like,
And then,
we would
yes,
have to do
yeah.
like a but I'm just asking,
No, yeah, I know what you mean.
conversation, I'm just thinking to myself, like, how do we create some more excitement? Naming the football field with the mascot, with the high school potential, and how we frame that, and could we put that on the ref as a question to garner more support, or?
So this is a little bit off topic, so we'll keep it short, but in general, the referendum question has to be very specific as to, the finances that we're asking for approval. Adding extra things in there, as far as those sorts of things are gonna be frowned upon, because it's going to muddy the question that we're trying to get an answer to. And so, but that being said, I think once we get an answer from the referendum, if that's the step that we take, then we would move forward with.
Not the cart before the horse, but
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, like, how do you?
There would be a lot of communication, a lot of events. We'd be asking community, staff members, students, there might be competitions and voting that
We'll have that all
happen.
out there prior to the question and the excitement, just not that type of question on it. 'Cause
I don't
think
know if we
should-
would do it ahead of time before the referendum, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know if it would happen before that, because we have to know if we're getting it or not before we, because if the answer to the
That's a lot of
referendum.
wasted energy.
Yeah, the answer to the referendum is
Energy,
no.
How do we know it's wasted energy when it's energy that could be creating excitement?
It could be.
Could be.
And I think it might,
The community, and the people have the opportunity, I know.
the bill might, it might be a question more for.
It got my
Sure.
brain moving, thinking about this stuff, so I wanted to get it out there. Is this a different topic, or a different meeting topic?
Yes, I think
that
it's
we should
definitely a
add
different
sooner
meaty
rather than
topic.
later.
I think it's something that if the board decides to do the referendum question, and then there's all these communication things that come after that, and we're working with a consultant to help us with that, I think that's a question for them, and they would be really probably good to help us with that, so.
The other thing is I don't know all of the exact requirements, but I remember Mr. Foster saying that there's only a certain number of questions that you're allowed to ask in the course of a year as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, and I can understand that naming the high school might not be a question for the referendum on the ballot, but
Right.
we need to have that
No, I
juice.
agree 100%, agree 100%. Is there any questions for Steve about his presentation, which was very, very thorough?
Very user-friendly.
Yeah.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, we've had a couple different.
And I want to commend you on creating the BIP, because
Thank you.
I can tell you put a lot of work in it, and there is a little bit of ambiguity when it comes to what things get funded, or what projects get done, what don't. Some people might have bigger ideas that are too expensive and they can't get it done. A lot of people have smaller ideas and they're able to get them done because it works in the budget. So, is there any thought process as to putting together, like, where's the money for these gonna come from? Is it coming from building budgets? Are we going to be is there a plan to set aside a certain chunk of money for BIPs every year like we do with SIP? Or in the board budget? Has there been thought about that, talked about?
My goal right now is that it would not be an additional line item in the budget, that I would set aside a certain amount out of our current CIP budget
I see.
and our maintenance budget, but also some of the work could come from volunteers, people could donate, it could be school budget, it could be, a company or an individual just says, well, I want to give this money to the school for this project.
Sure.
So we're, anything that makes sense and isn't against board policy in terms of funding, we'd be looking at to help mitigate the cost of coming solely out of Fund 10.
Okay. I'm sorry, Brendan, you had some questions?
No, well, I do, but you took my congratulations on putting this together, though. I really like the idea of making sure that we've got that spread across the district. Is there, with the tracking of equity across the district and where things are done, do we know where money has currently been spent in pockets, or do we know, like on these past projects, where that stuff has happened? So then, once we do this, would we be able to see a change in the distribution of where things are, where money's spent?
And you're talking about projects that would now be considered BIPs, correct?
Yeah.
There isn't any one place that I could go to where I could see what had been done, how much it cost, and where it was done at. But given that my goal, a part of this is to have a 5-year plan as well, is that we would be able to see at the end of any fiscal year, here's the projects that were done, and these are the projects, these are the sites, and this is how much it cost, and this is what the funding stream looked like.
Okay, so moving forward, we'd have that, but not necessarily
Not necessarily
comparable
going
for
back.
later. Okay. And then, with all of these other projects that you've listed, which looks amazingly long for you guys to get all of this done, do you guys track the costs at the sites for, like, how many times you're having to repair or replace things, so you have kind of a running tally of the cost it takes to maintain specific buildings, so we know whether or not one is costing us more or not?
We aren't currently, we could go back and do that from a CIP perspective, but that's it. What I can do right now is just look at the number of work orders in each major category, like plumbing, electrical, whatever, by site. It wouldn't give us a dollar amount, but the School Dude is the program that we use now for our work orders, and we also use it for our facilities rentals and our preventative maintenance. But again, this is something that started probably back in June when they sent me the new invoice for the next year. And all the 2 modules that we're using, each went up 30%. And so I called them up and said, nicely, what the are you talking about here? Because the program hasn't changed, the features of the program hasn't changed. How can you justify increasing it by 30%? And their answer was, well, we're trying to get all of our costs in line with the market. And I said, so in other words, you just felt like it was time to raise your prices? And the person was honest and said yes. So I said, okay, so I need to really start looking at I'm just going to tell you up front, I need to start looking at other programs, because I'm not sure that the functionality of what we have is worth what you're asking us to pay. I mean, we need a work order, program, but I don't know if this is the right one. And so when I was talking with them, they said, well, we do have a program called Asset Essentials. And it's still school dude, but it's a new and improved, and it's more interactive. It's a lot more functionality to it. And one of the things that you can do, and you can on the current one, but it's not as easy to use, is you can put in all the labor costs for all of the maintenance workers. And then when you assign them to a project, you have them keep track of their hours, and then it'll calculate, how much they spent on each of those work orders. So we will be able to, again, going forward. The other nice thing with this is that you can get the app on your phone or an iPad or a computer, so they can be at the site. They can call up a work order, and they can push a button that says start time now for that work order, go and work on it. When they're done, they come back and they can push the end time, and it'll automatically calculate how much time they spent, the amount per hour for that worker, and say, here's the total of this. And then you also can add parts to it. So we'll be able to, for every work order, we'll be able to see what that costs.
That one was only 60% more.
60, yeah.
Actually, it ended up being, I think it was about less than 10% more than what they were going to charge us.
That doesn't make any sense.
No,
That pricing structure makes 0 sense.
no,
It's a better functional software,
it's a lot better. I mean, we can
but
do,
it's 20% cheaper than the lesser ones.
yeah, we can do batch approvals, we can do a lot of different things that we couldn't before. We can actually now set it up where if we have, like, say, we have a contractor come in to do some plumbing work that we either don't have the expertise or we don't have the equipment for, we can set the contractor up in the program then, and we can track their hours for that work order as well.
Okay. So this is again something going forward, but not necessarily back.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's all?
That's it.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah,
You're
thank you
welcome.
so much.
So I just want to say for our new board members and Jeff and Bill, you can chime in here. We didn't used to get these. We were something that when we previously were trying to get a good report about stuff, it wasn't something that would annually come about. And so ever since Steve's been here, he's done such a great job of delineating everything. And you can see all the stuff that they get done with the money that we allocate to them every year, which is.
I like the visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can see what was fixed.
A lot of work.
Yeah, before and after pictures, they do a lot. They do a lot for sure. So thank you very much for the effort you put into this and the effort you and your team do to making sure our district can be safe and function and look as good as it can. The concrete work always is like a low priority because it's like, whatever, it's concrete work, but it makes a huge difference when you look at it. It makes it look so much nicer when it's not a crumbling step or something like that. It's, nice new work like that. So thank you for keeping up on all the things that you have to keep up on.
You're welcome.
All right, if there's no other questions, then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed? We are adjourned.